Hi, welcome back to another video. Before we get into it, I want to announce that I'm launching a Patreon, so if you want to get extended videos behind the scenes, take part in some drawings, and community access through Discord, then make sure to visit my Patreon. The link is in the description below. Over the years, I've made a bunch of swords and other weapons, and I've collected a bunch as well, and I actually keep them all in my office. And I thought, it's about time that I add a little bit of something to make it a little bit spookier all year round in my office. So today, we're going to make some really creepy wall hooks. And to start, I just need a couple of old dolls. And really, all I care about is their arms, so we just need to go ahead and remove their arms. So, actually, maybe I won't do this on camera. I'll be right back. All right, here we are. We've got 4 arms, 2 dolls, 4 arms, and I didn't need any of the rest of the dolls, so I just threw them out. And here's basically the idea. We're going to hang these on the wall so that they can be hooks. But I need more than just these 4, so we're going to make silicone molds of them to start with. And to modify the angle of how they sit on the wall and how they poke out, I am going to cut the bases at an angle here. I'm using a sharp utility knife and just kind of guessing. You can see this kind of flattens out the angle as it sits from the wall. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all 4 of these. And I'm going to build the mold box out of foam core. So I've kind of laid them out here, and I'm just tracing where each of them are going to fit inside the mold. All right, let's glue these things on. And I want the glue to be all the way around to cut off. I don't want silicone seeping up underneath it, so make sure there's a whole ring of it, but I also don't want it to like come out the edges. I want it to kind of stay underneath as best as I can. So okay, we'll be able to clean off this area later when we cast it, but it would be great to do. Whew, the less work we have to do, the better. So spend a little bit of time now. Will save us a lot of time of having to clean up flashing and things like that every time we cast these. All right, they're glued down. This is kind of what they look like. Now let's make a box around them. We want to conserve space as best we can. So the goal is to make the box as big as it needs to be, but as small as possible. All right, there we go. It's an odd-shaped platform, but that's what we're going to do. All of this is going to be filled with silicone. But it has to because of the tips. So I'm just building the walls using foam core. The whole box will be made out of foam core. And I'm using hot glue to connect it all together. And then, this is a super important step, is I'm going through every outside seam and making sure that there's a bead of hot glue around it, because silicone's really expensive and we don't want any leaking out. And to make the mold, we're going to use this platinum silicone. It's Short A20 and it's clear, so I also got some silicone colors. And I think we'll start with blue and I've never used these, so I don't know how much to add. But the way we mix this is 1-to-1 by volume. So I am taking part A, and I'm mixing 4 ounces, or pouring 4 ounces into a cup. Then part B, pour 4 ounces, and then we'll add the color to part B. And again, I've not used this, so I'm not sure how much I need. I'll just try a few drops here. Mix that in. Barely did anything, so I'm going to put a little bit more in there. Now all I have are these 8-ounce cups, so I can only make small batches, but we'll see how that goes. And now we'll pour the A into B. We need to make sure that we scrape out the cup and get all of the part A into that, and then we stir it up really well. Again, scraping the sides, scraping the bottom, and we stir it until it is fully mixed. Now when we pour the silicone, we're going to pour from really high up in a thin little stream into one spot. This will help pop any bubbles that might be in there. It minimizes them at least. One of the reasons I chose this silicone is because of how thin it is, low viscosity. Is that right? Low viscosity? Anyway, it's really thin, so then the bubbles can rise up to the top. And again, I'm making little batches, so I just mixed up little batches, and then I decided, why not just try different colors? And so, I made a purple one and a red one. And then I was like, this is going to take forever. I wish I could make more, so I found a bigger bucket, and I measured out 8 ounces of both A and B, mixed them together in a different bucket, this time with some yellow, orange. And then I filled it up to the top, and then let it sit overnight to cure.
Oh, satisfying.
This is the leftover little bit that was left in the bucket after mixing the last batch.
Oh, I love it. Look at that. Rubber, silicone rubber.
And now we just have to pull off all of the foam board. And the silicone doesn't stick to this at all. It's all just a matter of tearing the foam board off. It's a little bit of work, but it's really not that big of a deal. And then we've got our arms embedded in the silicone, and we just need to pull them out. Now, even though the silicone is a little bit stretchy, at this thickness, it's really hard to move it. So we're going to cut into it. So I'm just going to cut a single edge down in a zigzag motion along the length of each arm. And the zigzagging creates keys or registrations so that the mold can close completely when we're done. And with a little bit of effort, I can pop the original arms out. And now we've got cavities there that we can fill. And the silicone's a little too thick here for me to cut the zigzag into, so I'm just shaving off a big chunk of it. I can save this silicone and use it in future molds just to fill space. And with all the original arms removed, you can see that we've got our zigzag cuts, and it closes right back up. Now, before casting the arms, we're going to visit Mr. Sanderson here. And I've got some screws. I'm just flattening opposite sides of the heads. See, I got a flat edge there. Here's a different one where you can see both sides are flattened. We're doing this because we're going to embed these into resin, and we're going to actually be able to screw the arms into the wall. And I don't want the torque to just let the screw spin inside. So by flattening the sides, it kind of has something to grip onto. And now we're getting ready to pour them. So I've got some foam board here with some holes, and I can stick the screws in them and kind of change the depth. You can see here. I'll adjust the depth that I want them to be, and then I can just set them over the top, and they'll set in the resin and harden in place. So I've got them set up for all 4. And the resin that I'm going to use to cast these is Smooth Cast 320. Now, my resin is very old. I've had it actually for a couple of years on the shelf. So this stuff kicks extremely fast. So you really only have like 30 seconds or so to mix it, stir it up really well, and then pour it in, and then it just starts kicking. And I don't know if that's because of how old it is or if it's just made that way. But it's totally workable as long as you know that that's how much time you have. But this is, again, 2 parts mixed by volume, so it's the same amount. So we're going to mix about 6 ounces here to start. Or no, 8 ounces to start. I figured that each arm's about 2 ounces, so this should work. So I'm pouring the A and the B, I'm just pouring them together into the same cup. And I make a big mistake here. In my anxiousness and my worry that I didn't have a lot of time to mix this together, I did not mix it well enough. And so there is some parts of this that are not mixed. You can kind of see there the marbling. You don't want to see that. It's going to cause me problems here a little bit later. But we pour this stuff in, and as quickly as we can, get it in there and then position our screws. Quickly this hardens. It turns off-white, and it starts kind of in the middle here. I've sped it up just 2 times, so you'll see it will just start to bloom. And I just let it sit overnight just to make sure it was 100% cured, even though it only needed maybe 30 minutes total. And we pop off the cardboard, or the foam core, and oh yeah, I forgot to tell you I had a rubber band around it to keep it closed. And then we can just grab hold of it, and with a little twist, it pops right out. And here is where I realize I hadn't mixed it well enough. If you've ever dealt with uncured resin, it's terrible. There's little bubbles and swirls and...
Oh, they're all sticky.
Yep.
Dang it.
All sticky. And this stickiness is going to haunt me for the rest of the project.
That one's perfect.
Well, at least I got one good one. But there's probably sticky, uncured resin inside all of my molds. And so I figured maybe if I were to mix another fully mixed batch and stick it in there, it would pull out some of that resin, or maybe mix with the uncured stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. This time I made sure to mix it properly. A few hours later I pull them out, and they're a little bit sticky. They're a lot better than the first batch, so I think it did pull out a lot of that, and when I reach inside I can't feel any of the resin in there, so I think I got it cleared out now. But we got to deal with the stickiness that's on these.
So a lot of these have stickiness on them, which is probably where I didn't mix the resin as long as I should have, and I want to try to clean that off. Usually when you have like the individual parts of resin, you can clean them off with acetone. I'm going to try that. The problem is acetone also dissolves the finished resin. So I've got, oh here we go, I've got a little arm here that I didn't put the screw in yet, and I'm actually going to test on this and see how bad it can be on the cured resin. We got this hand. Worst case, we ruin it even more, but right now we can't do anything with it. So I'm just going to try to get the stickiness off.
All right, and the truth is, this helped a little bit. It did not 100% solve the problem. So my next thought is, well, maybe I can just cover it with paint. So let's see what happens if we just paint over it. We need a base coat anyway, and look, these screws are great. I can just kind of screw them into the back of this cork and hold them up for painting. So let's put a base coat of spray paint. And I'm going to do half of these with a dark brown base coat and the other half with like a ivory base coat. And the truth is that the paint didn't really solve the problem. What I found is that the resin still reacted with the paint and it never fully dried. You can see that I can kind of wipe off some of it. But I did find that if I sprayed it all with a matte clear acrylic spray, then it would dry up. So let's take a look at some of these base coats.
These I've given kind of a metallic base coat. These have a brown base coat. I think I'm going to touch it up. These are, it's kind of an ivory color. I think it's called parchment. You'll see it's kind of dirty looking because I haven't been real careful with them, and that's okay because that's kind of, I'm just leaning into that. It's got all of these imperfections. I'll just let those come out as details, make them look older. And I've got one pair here that I've painted. It looks white, it's off-white, just barely.
So I'm going to do different finishes on each of these. For this first one, I'm using the gold rub and buff that I made. If you haven't seen my how to make 3D prints look like real metal video, you should go back and watch it. That's where I show you how to make this rub and buff and how to use it. But I'm just rubbing this on, and I'm going to be pretty generous with it. I want it to be really golden. Just going to kind of make it feel like it's made out of bronze or weathered brass, something like that. This set, I'm going to kind of do it the way that I would do bones or zombie. I'm using some burnt umber paint mixed with some water, and I'm just splotching it on here haphazardly. And then we'll just wipe it off, and it kind of stains the under color, so you get a hint of that. It also goes into any of the cracks and crevices, so you can see the detail of the surface. There's not a ton of detail on a doll arm. They're pretty smooth, but in between the fingers, things like that. And then I'm going to add a little bit of black to make just a little bit darker in some areas. I'm going to be pretty careful with the black. We don't want it too much. Black tends to stain quite a bit. But as with all of the painting that I do, you want lots of different colors because the different colors adds layers to it. It adds depth. It makes it feel like there's more than just one thing. And so we'll do another layer. This one is raw sienna, which you can see is very orange. We're just doing the same thing. Blotting it on. The longer you let it sit, the more it's going to stain underneath. And then we'll just dab it off. I'm not rubbing too much. It's mostly kind of dabbing, pushing it around. The texture of the paper towel that I'm using also leaves little kind of textured marks on there, which you want to make sure they don't look like it's a manufactured paper towel, but it adds a little bit of organicness. And that looks like a gross, dirty little arm. Okay, so I'll do the other one the same way. For the white ones, I'm going to just kind of keep them ghostly, so I am only going to use black and gray on here. Just cover it up, wipe it off. It's the exact same technique, just slightly different colors. I'm not trying to be careful at all, except that I splattered all over everything else. Oops. All right, dabbing it off, wiping it off. Again, we want just kind of the organic, gross feel. All right, and do the same thing with the other. The next set we're going to do very similarly. We're going to do it kind of the same. But you can see I'm using more extreme colors. I'm using this kind of magenta red. And I'm not doing this for like a bloody effect. I don't want it to be gross and bloody. But as we dab it off, you'll see how it stains the undercolor and actually kind of gives it a little bit of life. And the next color I'm using is this like seafoam color. Whereas the pink gives it a little bit of life, this color gives it the opposite, a little bit of not alive. And together, the kind of bluish foam and the reddish magenta mix together, and you kind of get a little bit of purple, almost bruising. Anyway, it's a different look. I kind of like it. And to finish that off, I am just going to use some dark burnt umber with a little bit of black in it to fill in all of the dark areas, and also just weather it down. And for the last pair, I made some rub and buff using some chameleon multicolor mica powder. It's one of those things where it's like purple from one angle and green from another angle and blue from another angle and red from another angle, whatever. Something like that. You can kind of see the sheen. But I'm just, I made the rub and buff with that stuff, and I'm just rubbing it on. And as usual, once I'm done with the rub and buff, I'll let it dry for a half an hour or so to harden up, and then I'll come back and just buff it with a soft cloth, and it'll be nice and shiny. And that's all there is to it. But we've got one last thing left. We've got to install them. So I'm going to take them to my office and install them, and we'll take a look at the final result. I had a ton of fun making this project. Now that I've got a mold, I can make as many casts as I want, and I can fill my whole wall up with little doll arms if I want. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please leave a thumbs up so that YouTube knows that other people might also like to see the video. And if you want to catch more videos like this, especially as it gets into the spooky season, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos. And if you would like to help support the channel, please visit my Patreon and become a member. I really appreciate it. Until next time, don't be bored, be creative.